It was a regular Thursday night, the kind that passed without much thought. Dinner was quiet as usual. My husband barely looked up from his laptop, muttering something about a deadline. My son laughed upstairs, likely gaming with his best friend, Ethan. I cleared the dishes alone, listening to the dull hum of the dishwasher as I wiped down the counter. The silence in our house wasn't uncomfortable, it was just routine, predictable. And for a long time I convinced myself that was enough. My husband and I had been married for over 20 years. Once we were passionate, inseparable. But life happened, jobs, bills, parenting. Somewhere along the line the spark faded. He became more of a provider than a partner, and I turned into someone who made sure the house ran smoothly. I didn't mind at first. I had love for my family. But lately, something had been gnawing at me. I felt invisible in my own home, like I had disappeared into the wallpaper. Ethan had been a fixture in our lives for years. He was practically part of the family. Charming, respectful, the kind of boy any parent would trust. I'd watched him grow from a skinny, awkward middle schooler into a confident, athletic young man. He'd always been sweet to me, always polite. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me longer than necessary, but I chalked it up to teenage awkwardness. That night, as I folded laundry, I paused with one of my son's hoodies in my hands. I remembered how little he'd been when I used to tuck him in, read him bedtime stories. Those days were long gone. Now I barely got a good night out of him. Still, it was my habit to check in on him before bed. I climbed the stairs quietly, the hallway dim except for the soft glow of his bedroom light. I knocked once, then pushed the door open without waiting for a reply. "Good night, sweetheart." But it wasn't my son sitting there. Ethan looked up from the edge of the bed, surprised but calm. He wasn't wearing a shirt, just sweatpants that sat low on his hips. "Hey, Mrs. D," he said casually. He went out to grab food with some friends. Told me to wait here. I hesitated in the doorway, a bit startled. "Oh. All right." I didn't know he was going out. "Yeah, it was last minute," he said, smiling. "I can leave if it's a problem." "No, not at all," I said quickly, brushing hair behind my ear. "I was just saying good night." He looked at me in a way that was different. Not inappropriate but focused, present. "You look tired," he said, voice softer than usual. "Long day." I nodded, unsure of why his attention made my heart beat faster. "Always." We shared a brief, quiet moment before I turned to leave. But something lingered in the air, a strange static I couldn't name. I went to bed that night feeling unsettled, but also, curiously, awake. The next few days passed without incident, but that moment with Ethan stayed with me. I tried to brush it off, tell myself I was overthinking, but his gaze had burned into me in a way I couldn't shake. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he looked at me, like I mattered, like I was still someone. Friday evening, I came home from the grocery store to find Ethan sitting at the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone. My son wasn't around. "He's in the shower," Ethan said, looking up. "Told me to wait here." I nodded, suddenly aware of how I looked. Wind-blown hair, light sweat on my skin. "You're always around lately," I said without meaning anything by it. "Hope that's not a bad thing," he replied, smiling. "I like being here." He stood to help me with the bags. Our hands touched briefly as he took one from me, and something flickered between us. He didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. We talked while I put things away. Small things, college plans, music, how my day went. But there was something under the surface, unspoken. He asked questions no one else asked. Not my husband. Not even my friends. He noticed things like the chipped nail polish on my fingers or the tiredness under my eyes. When he said I deserved a break, it didn't feel like a throwaway comment. Felt like a lifeline. I didn't realize how long we'd been talking until my son came downstairs. The moment shattered, and I quickly busied myself with putting away the milk. But Ethan caught my eye as he left the room, a quiet, knowing glance that said this wasn't over. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, I sat alone in the living room. I kept thinking about that look, his voice, the way he leaned in when he spoke to me. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You looked beautiful today." I meant that. I didn't need to ask who it was. I stared at the message, heart pounding. I shouldn't reply. I knew that. But my fingers moved before I could stop them. "You shouldn't say that." He answered almost instantly. "I'm not sorry I did." The line had been crossed, even if nothing physical had happened yet. The shift was undeniable. My heart was a mess of guilt and adrenaline. I hadn't felt that alive in years. The next afternoon, I walked into the guest room to drop off laundry. Ethan was there again, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Your son just left," he said, standing up slowly. The room felt heavy, charged. We stood facing each other. Neither of us moved, but neither of us stepped back. The silence stretched. "I know this is wrong," I whispered. "So do I," he said. "But it doesn't feel wrong." He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from my face. Closed my eyes. The moment before the storm is always the quietest. It ended on a Sunday. I woke up to my son's voice in the hallway, louder than usual, his footsteps fast. I was in the kitchen when he barged in, holding my phone in his hand, eyes wide with disbelief and betrayal. He didn't yell. He just looked at me and asked, "Is this real?" I didn't need to ask what he meant. My heart stopped. He had seen the messages, photos, words that should have never existed between me and his best friend. I couldn't speak. He stood there, his face contorted, not with anger but with hurt. "He was like my brother," he said. "You were supposed to be my mother." The weight of his words crushed me. He dropped the phone and walked out. I didn't follow. I didn't have the right to. That night my husband came home. I don't know if my son told him or if he sensed it, but he was colder than I'd ever seen him. He didn't confront me with rage, just silence. The kind that says everything. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He slept in the guest room without a word. Ethan didn't reach out. I never heard from him again. No explanation, no goodbye. Just a name that no one said anymore. My son cut him out of his life completely, and in the process he started cutting me out too. Every conversation became short. Every glance was distant. Trust was gone, and I knew I had destroyed it. My husband and I tried to act normal, for a few weeks at least. But eventually he sat me down and said, "I don't think I can look at you the same." There was no shouting, just resignation. I moved into my sister's guest room the following month. The silence in that space was different. It wasn't peaceful, it was punishment. I lost everything I didn't know I had been taking for granted. The steady, if distant, love of my husband. The admiration of my son. The warmth of a home that once felt safe. I had gambled everything for moments that were thrilling but empty in the end. And I paid for them in full. People think affairs are just about lust or boredom. But they're often about something deeper. Loneliness. Being starved of affection. Feeling like you don't matter anymore. Ethan gave me a glimpse of something I had forgotten. A version of myself I missed. But it was never real. It couldn't be. Months passed. I tried to reach out to my son. Messages left unread. A birthday card returned unopened. I don't blame him. Some wounds take longer to scar. Some never do. I stopped expecting forgiveness and started learning how to live with what I had done. Now I wake up alone. I eat alone. I sleep alone. But I don't lie anymore. I face the truth every day. That moment of feeling alive cost me everything. And maybe that's exactly what I deserved. A week passed before it happened. I had been balancing on the edge, trying to pretend I was in control, telling myself that a few words and glances didn't mean anything. But I knew better. Ethan knew better too. He stopped pretending he was just my son's friend. I stopped pretending I was just being polite. Lines blurred fast, and once they did, there was no going back. It was a quiet afternoon. My husband was out of town for a conference. My son was spending the weekend at a friend's house. Ethan texted me. I left my charger. Mind if I swing by? I said yes, knowing exactly what I was agreeing to. When he arrived, neither of us made small talk. We sat across from each other on the couch, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he leaned forward and kissed me. No hesitation, no fear. Just heat. I should have stopped him. I should have reminded him of his age, reminded myself of who I was. Instead, I pulled him closer. There was no rush, no awkwardness. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. I hadn't been touched like that in years. Not gently. Not like someone actually wanted me. He knew what he was doing, and every kiss, every breath against my skin reminded me I wasn't invisible. I was wanted. I was seen. And it was intoxicating. Afterwards, we lay in silence. He touched my hand, whispered that I deserved more than the life I'd settled for. I didn't have an answer. My mind was spinning with what had just happened, what it meant. I wasn't naive. I knew it wasn't love. But it felt like something dangerously close to it. I told myself it was a one-time mistake. A moment of weakness I could lock away and forget. But the next time came 3 days later. Then again the week after that. We became experts at secrets, knowing when to look, when not to speak, how to make sure no one suspected a thing. I told myself it was harmless as long as no one got hurt. I clung to that lie. But each time chipped away at something inside me. I started avoiding my husband, pulling away from my son. Guilt settled like a weight on my chest, heavy and constant. I hated what I was doing. But I also hated how alive he made me feel. That duality was suffocating. Being two women at once. The mother and the lover, the wife and the secret. Ethan never pressured me. He didn't make promises, didn't try to define what we were. He just kept showing up, saying the right things, touching me in the ways I hadn't known I craved. I was unraveling, and he was the thread I kept pulling. I knew it was temporary. I knew it had an end. But knowing that didn't stop me.